Hello, my name is Adrian Langford, 39 years old. I'm a nurse at St. Mary's Hospital in Richmond, Virginia. If you ask me what my life is like, I'd say it's like an endless night shift. Exhausting, sometimes chaotic, but I still try to keep everything balanced for the people I love. I'm not the type to ramble, but if you're here, willing to listen, I'll tell you my story. Not because I want pity, but because I think it's worth sharing. A story about me, about Maya, about Zoe, and about the scars I've carried my whole life. I was born and raised in Richmond, in a quiet middle-class neighborhood with red brick houses, ancient oak trees, and Sunday afternoons filled with the smell of barbecue from backyards. My family was the quintessential American household, white conservative parents and a life neatly arranged like storage boxes in the garage. My father, William Langford, was a banker working at a Wells Fargo branch for 30 years before retiring. He was strict, always wearing a tucked-in shirt even at home, and loved talking about traditional values at every dinner. My mother, Eleanor, was a homemaker, the woman the whole neighborhood called the queen of the kitchen. She baked crispy cookies, hosted tea parties for the women's club, and kept the house so clean you could eat dinner off the floor. I was the eldest of 3 siblings. Below me was my brother Julian, 3 years younger, now an insurance salesman in Charlotte. Then came my sister Clara, 5 years younger, currently an elementary school teacher in Raleigh. As kids, we were pretty close. Julian and I would play basketball in the backyard while Clara tagged along, insisting on being the referee. But as we grew up, we each went our own way, and family gatherings slowly became more of an obligation than a joy. My personality? I'm not the kind of person who stands out in a crowd. I'm quiet, prefer listening over talking, and always try to do the right thing. I don't have big dreams like others, no aspirations to be a billionaire or famous. I just want a simple life where I can help others and come home to the people I love. Maybe that's why I chose to be a nurse. The job isn't glamorous, the pay isn't great, but every time I help a patient through pain or hold their hand in their final moments, I feel like I'm doing something meaningful. As a kid, I didn't think I'd become a nurse. My dad wanted me to follow in his footsteps, work in a bank, wear a suit, and sit behind a desk. But when I was 16, my grandmother had a stroke. I stayed by her side during her final days in the hospital, watching how the nurses cared for her. Not just giving medication or checking blood pressure, but offering gentle handholds and encouraging words. I knew I wanted to do that work. When I told my parents about my decision to study nursing, my dad scoffed, saying it was women's work. My mom worried, afraid I wouldn't make enough to live, but I was determined. I attended Virginia Commonwealth University, graduated with honors, and started working at St. Mary's right after. My life in Richmond in those early years was simple. I rented a small apartment near the hospital, rode an old bike to work, and spent my free time reading or watching baseball. I wasn't the partying type or someone who chased relationships. My friends, mostly hospital colleagues, teased me for living like an old man. But I was content. I didn't need much. A morning coffee, a smooth shift, and a good night's sleep were enough. Everything changed when I met Maya. I was 25 at the time. The hospital was holding a charity event to raise money for children with heart conditions. I don't like crowded events, but my department head insisted I attend as a nurse representative. I stood in a corner holding a glass of orange juice, trying to avoid eye contact. Then I saw her, Maya Ellison, 27, standing in the crowd like a star. She wore an emerald green dress, her curly hair cascading down, and her smile lit up the room. She was talking to a group of donors, her voice warm and confident, but not arrogant. I didn't know what she did, but I guessed she was someone important because everyone wanted to talk to her. I had no intention of approaching her. I'm not the type to strike up conversations with strangers, especially someone like Maya. But fate had other plans. While I was getting more water at the bar, she accidentally bumped into me, spilling her red wine all over my white shirt. I froze, and she apologized profusely. "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, I wasn't looking. Let me get you a napkin," she said, rushing to grab paper towels, her face worried but still somehow cheerful. "It's fine," I mumbled, trying to stay calm despite my pounding heart. "This shirt, it's cheap anyway." She laughed, a laugh that made me forget the wine stain. "Thank you. I'm Maya, by the way. And you are—" Adrian Langford, nurse here," I replied. "A nurse? That's amazing. I've always admired people who do your kind of work. Tell me, what's it like being a nurse?" Maya asked, her eyes wide and bright like sunlight. And so we talked. It turned out Maya worked in communications, writing for a non-profit organization. She was smart, funny, and had a way of putting people at ease instantly. We talked about everything, from my night shifts to her articles to how we both loved jazz and hated raw tomatoes. When the event ended, I mustered all my courage to ask for her number. She smiled, wrote it on a napkin, and said, "Call me, nurse." I called Maya 2 days later after spending a whole day agonizing over what to say. We met at a small cafe near the James River. Our first date lasted 3 hours, then came the second, the third. I don't know when I fell in love with her. Maybe it was when she told me about her childhood in Atlanta, growing up in a middle-class black family with a teacher father and an accountant mother. Maybe it was when she read a poem she wrote, her voice trembling with emotion. Or maybe it was when she held my hand for the first time during an evening walk and said, "Adrian, you're the kindest person I've ever met." Maya wasn't just a partner. She was my soulmate, the person who made me want to be the best version of myself. We connected on deep values, compassion, fairness, and a belief that the world could be better if everyone tried. I knew I wanted to spend my life with her. 2 years later, I proposed to Maya in a small park under an old oak tree. I didn't have an expensive diamond ring, just a simple silver one I'd saved up for. I knelt, my hands shaking so much I nearly dropped the ring, and said, "Maya, you're the light of my life. I can't promise you the world, but I promise to love and protect you forever. Will you marry me?" She cried, nodded, and hugged me tightly. It was the happiest moment of my life. But not everyone was happy for us. When I told my parents about Maya, the air in the house turned icy. I remember that evening sitting in the living room, my parents looking at me with anger and disappointment. My mom spoke first, her voice trembling. "Are you joking, Adrian? A black girl? What about this family? Our lineage?" I was stunned. I knew my parents were conservative, but I didn't expect such fierce opposition. My dad chimed in, his voice cold. "She might be a nice person, but she doesn't belong in our world. If you marry her, don't expect us to accept it." I tried to explain that Maya was intelligent, talented, that she was the woman I loved, but they wouldn't listen. My mom even said she would taint our lineage and drag me down. I left the house that day with a heavy heart, realizing the family I loved wasn't what I thought. Julian and Clara were initially neutral but gradually distanced themselves. Julian told me, "Don't make a big deal out of it," while Clara, worried, asked if I was sure. I knew they were influenced by our parents, but it still hurt. I thought they'd have my back. Still, I didn't waver. I loved Maya, and I believed love was what mattered most. About 2 months later, Maya and I had our wedding in a small, cozy church in Atlanta. My parents didn't come, neither did Julian nor Clara. Only close friends, colleagues, and Maya's family, who welcomed me like their own, were there. When Maya walked in wearing her wedding dress, I forgot all the pain. She looked like a dream, and as we exchanged vows, I knew I'd made the right choice. Our marriage was filled with happy days. Maya brought me joy I never expected. We bought a small house in the Richmond suburbs with a garden where Maya diligently planted flowers. I continued working as a nurse while Maya advanced in her career, becoming the communications director for a large nonprofit. We dreamed of a family, of children, of faraway trips. Then Zoe, our daughter, was born a year later. Zoe was a miracle. She had my eyes and Maya's smile, her warm brown skin like sunlight. When I held Zoe for the first time, I felt like a completely new man, stronger, more responsible, and overflowing with love. Maya looked at me, smiling tiredly after labor, and said, "Adrian, she's going to do amazing things." I didn't know then that Maya's words weren't just the loving sentiment of a mother. They were like a prophecy. But before Zoe could work her miracles, life dealt us a tragedy I never thought I could overcome. The early years of our marriage were a string of happy days. We weren't rich, but we had enough. In the mornings, I'd brew coffee for both of us while Maya made toast with peanut butter, her favorite. We'd sit at the kitchen table laughing about little things like how Maya always spilled her coffee when she got too excited talking, or how I kept forgetting to lock the back door. Those moments, small and ordinary, were all I needed. When Zoe was born, our life became even more complete. I remember the first night we brought her home. I barely slept, sitting by her crib watching her breathe steadily, terrified that if I closed my eyes, this miracle would vanish. Maya teased me. "Adrian, you don't have to pull a night shift at home. Go to sleep, she's fine." But I couldn't take my eyes off Zoe. She was so tiny, clutching my finger, and I knew from that moment every decision I made would be for her. Being parents wasn't easy. Maya and I were often sleep-deprived, taking turns soothing Zoe when she cried at night. I learned to change diapers, mix formula, and sing lullabies I never thought I'd sing. Maya, despite being exhausted from work, always made time to play with Zoe, read her books, and tell her stories about her childhood in Atlanta. We dreamed about the future. Zoe growing up, going to school, maybe becoming a doctor, a writer, or whatever she wanted. Maya said, "You know, I want Zoe to grow up confident, unafraid of anything, no matter how harsh the world is." But the world, as I soon realized, was harsher than we could have imagined. In 2015, Zoe had just turned 2. She was starting to babble her first words, loved running around the house on her tiny legs, and was obsessed with the comic books Maya bought her. Our life was busy but happy. I had just been promoted to head nurse, and Maya was invited to speak at a major event in Washington, D.C. I was proud of her, but also worried. Maya often worked late, attending evening events, and though Richmond wasn't a dangerous place, I didn't like her being out alone at night. That night, November 14th, was freezing cold. Maya was at a charity event downtown, a fundraiser for immigrant children. She called me at 9 p.m., her voice cheerful. "Adrian, I'm almost done. It's been a great night. You'd like the people I met today. I'll be home in an hour. Kiss Zoe for me." I smiled, told her to drive safely, and went back to putting Zoe to bed. But Maya didn't come home. By 11 p.m., I started to worry. I called her, but she didn't answer. I texted, no reply. My heart raced, a gnawing unease tightening my chest. I tried to reassure myself. Maybe she was stuck in traffic or her phone died. But when the clock struck midnight, I couldn't take it anymore. I called a colleague at the hospital, asked her to watch Zoe, and drove to the event venue. When I arrived, the police had cordoned off the area. Ambulance lights flashed, the crowd murmured, and I heard the word attack. I ran forward, pushing through people, my heart pounding like it would explode. An officer stopped me, asking who I was. I shouted, "My wife, Maya Ellison, where is she?" They led me to an alley nearby. I saw her lying on the sidewalk, blood pooling around her coat. Maya, the light of my life, was there, motionless. I knelt beside her, grabbed her hand, called her name over and over, but she didn't respond. The paramedics were trying to save her, but I knew. I'm a nurse. I've seen that look in their eyes, the look of those who know there's no hope. Maya was taken to St. Mary's Hospital, where I worked. I followed the ambulance, sat by her in the ER, held her hand, and prayed for a miracle. But no miracle came. Maya passed away at 1 a.m., in my arms, in the very hospital where I had saved so many others. The doctor declared she died from blood loss due to multiple stab wounds. I didn't hear anything after that. The world collapsed, leaving only the sound of my heartbeat and the image of Maya's eyes closed forever. Later, I learned the horrific truth. Maya was attacked by 3 white men as she walked to her car. They targeted her because of her skin color. A hate crime, the police called it. They hurled vile slurs at her, mocked her, then stabbed her. The attackers were caught a few days later thanks to security cameras and a witness's testimony. But what hurt even more was the trial that followed. The perpetrators were sentenced to only a few years in prison, with the excuse of insufficient evidence of intent to kill. One of them even smirked as he left the courtroom. Justice, something I once believed in, turned out to be a cruel joke. I can't describe how I felt then. Pain, anger, helplessness. They swirled into a storm in my chest. I wanted to scream, to break everything, to seek revenge. But then I looked at Zoe, my 2-year-old, sleeping in her crib, and I knew I couldn't fall apart. Maya had left Zoe to me, and I had to live, to be strong, for our daughter. The months after Maya's death were the darkest of my life. I went back to work just 2 weeks after the funeral, not because I wanted to, but because I needed money to raise Zoe. I worked like a machine, tending to patients, giving injections, checking blood pressure, but inside I was empty. Every time I saw the ER where Maya died, it felt like another stab to my heart. At home, I tried to be a good father, but it wasn't easy. Zoe was too young to understand where her mom had gone, but she felt the loss. She cried more, clung to me, and every time she called out, "Mommy," my heart tore apart. I read to her, sang to her, tried to smile even when tears welled up. I brought Zoe to the hospital during night shifts, letting her sleep in the staff lounge on an old armchair wrapped in a hospital blanket. My colleagues pitied me. They took turns holding Zoe, brought me food, but no one could fill the void Maya left. I tried reaching out to my parents, hoping for support. I called, wrote letters, told them about Maya's death, about Zoe, about how I was struggling. But there was no response. My mom sent one short message. "We're very sorry about Maya, but you chose your path." I don't know what I expected, but their coldness made me realize I was truly alone. Julian and Clara stayed silent too. The family I once thought was my refuge was now just a distant memory. But no matter how much it hurt, I couldn't give up. I had to live for Zoe, for my 2-year-old daughter. Every day I woke up early, made porridge for her, dropped her off at daycare, then rushed to the hospital. I saved every penny. No coffee shop visits, no new clothes, not even the baseball tickets I used to love. Everything was for Zoe, to give her a good life, to ensure she didn't suffer like I did. But I couldn't shield Zoe from the outside world. When she started preschool, I realized her skin color, Maya's skin color, made her a target for prying eyes. Once, while picking her up, I overheard a mother whisper, "That mixed-race girl who lost her mom at 2, right? Such a pity." I gripped Zoe's hand tighter, swallowed my anger, and told her, "You're the most special girl in the world, Zoe. Don't let anyone make you think otherwise." Zoe, though young, seemed to understand. She hugged me, and I knew I had to do everything to protect her. But I didn't expect that Zoe, with her small but resilient heart, would soon become the one holding me up, rather than the other way around. The years following Maya's death were a long journey, filled with exhausting days and sleepless nights. I lived for Zoe, but sometimes I wondered if I had the strength to give her the good life Maya had dreamed of. I was a nurse, not a superhero. I didn't have extra money, a family to lean on, or the strength to soothe the pain in my heart. But I had Zoe, and she was the reason I got up every morning. Even when at times I just wanted to lie down and never wake up. Being a single father was unlike any hospital shift. There were no guidelines, no colleagues to help, no breaks. I was Zoe's dad, mom, and friend all at once. Every day started at 5 a.m. when I made oatmeal for Zoe, adding a bit of honey because she loved sweets. I dropped her off at daycare, then rushed to St. Mary's Hospital, working 12-hour shifts, sometimes 16 if there was an emergency. After work, I picked up Zoe, made a simple dinner, usually pasta or mashed potatoes, and sat with her, listening to her talk about her drawings at school or her innocent stories about friends. Zoe grew up surrounded by my love, but also in the shadow of loss. She was too young to remember Maya clearly, but I saw Maya in Zoe every day, in her radiant smile and the sparkle in her eyes when she heard a story, in the way she hugged me tightly when I was sad. I tried to tell Zoe about her mom, about how Maya loved her, about the dreams Maya had. I read the same picture books Maya used to read, sang the songs she loved, even though my voice was off-key. When Zoe asked, "Where's Mommy, Daddy?" I could only hold her and say, "Mommy's in heaven, sweetheart. She's always watching you." The outside world wasn't kind to Zoe. In preschool, she started to notice she was different. Her brown skin, inherited from Maya, made her the target of curious stares and cruel whispers. Once, when I picked her up, I heard another kid say, "Zoe doesn't look like her dad, she's so dark." Zoe stood there, head down, clutching her hands. I knelt, wiped her tears, and said, "You're the most beautiful girl in the world, Zoe. You look like your mom, and she was the most wonderful person I ever knew." She smiled, but I knew those words left a scar. I tried to protect Zoe, but I couldn't shield her from everything. I taught her to be confident, to hold her head high, to not let cruel words hurt her. But deep down, I was afraid. I feared this world, the one that took Maya, would hurt Zoe too. I feared I wasn't strong enough to help her through it. But Zoe, even as a young child, was stronger than I imagined. She had a resilient heart, a creative soul, and a talent I didn't recognize until she was 6 years old. When Zoe turned 6, she started to love writing, not the typical scribbles of a child, a few lines about a cat or a tree. Zoe wrote long, complex, imaginative stories. One day I found her at the kitchen table, scribbling in one of Maya's old notebooks. I asked, "What are you writing, Zoe?" She looked up, her eyes shining, and said, "A story about a girl who can fly, Daddy. She lives on a planet full of talking trees." I smiled, thinking it was just a kid's game. But when I read what Zoe wrote, I was stunned. Her story spanned dozens of pages with a tight plot, vivid characters, and magical details I couldn't believe a 6-year-old could dream up. She drew inspiration from the stories I told, from Maya's picture books, and from her boundless imagination. I sat with Zoe, listening to her describe her world, and for the first time since Maya's death, I felt a spark of light in my heart. I started encouraging Zoe to write more. Every evening after dinner, we sat at the kitchen table. I read or worked, and she wrote. She wrote about cloud kingdoms, singing dragons, and brave girls fighting monsters. I didn't know then that those stories weren't just play. They were Zoe's way of facing the world, her mother's loss, and the judgmental stares at school. When Zoe was 7, she finished a story over 100,000 words long, a true fantasy novel. I read it, and though I'm no literary expert, I knew it was special. Zoe looked at me, serious as an adult, and said, "Daddy, I want to send this to people to read." I was surprised but proud. I knew nothing about publishing, but I started researching, sending Zoe's manuscript to small publishers with a clumsy letter. "This is my daughter's story, please read it." Most publishers didn't respond. But one day, when Zoe was 8, we got a letter from a small publisher in Virginia. They wanted to publish Zoe's book. I remember that moment. Zoe jumped up, hugged me, and shouted, "Daddy, I did it." I held her, tears streaming down my face, not because of the book, but because I saw Maya in Zoe, her strength, her creativity, her refusal to give up. Zoe's book, The Girl on the Clouds, was released in 2022 when she was 9. It wasn't just a small success, it took off. Local newspapers wrote about Richmond's writing prodigy. Readers loved Zoe's story, with its brave, brown-skinned heroine fighting for justice in a fantastical world. The book sold tens of thousands of copies, and for the first time, I could breathe easier financially. I used the money from Zoe's book to pay off debts, fix the roof, and open a savings account for her. But more importantly, I watched Zoe grow with the confidence Maya had dreamed for her. When Zoe was 11, she did something I never expected. She wrote a new book, but this time it wasn't fantasy. It was an autobiography, about me, about Maya, about our journey. She titled it, My father. Zoe wrote about my love for Maya, her mother's death, the nights I brought her to the hospital, and how I tried everything to make her happy. She wrote with a sincerity and depth that brought me to tears. I hadn't realized Zoe observed me so closely, understood the pain I tried to hide. "Daddy, I want the world to know how amazing you are," Zoe said when she showed me the manuscript. I hugged her, speechless. I didn't think I deserved it, but Zoe saw something in me I couldn't see. I sent the manuscript to Zoe's old publisher, and they immediately agreed to publish it. My Father was released in 2024 when Zoe was 11. The book wasn't just a success in the US, it became a global phenomenon. Zoe, the 11-year-old with a resilient heart, became a famous young author, appearing on talk shows and speaking at schools about writing and overcoming hardship. The book sold millions of copies, bringing in millions of dollars. I no longer had to worry about money, but what made me proudest was Zoe. She turned pain into art, scars into light. But Zoe's success brought new challenges. As she gained fame, the world paid more attention to us. Some people admired Zoe, but others didn't. I read comments online calling her an overhyped kid, or worse, insults about her skin color. I tried to shield Zoe from them, but she was smarter than I thought. One day she said, "Daddy, I know not everyone likes me, but I don't care. I write because I want to and for Mom." I looked at Zoe and I saw Maya. I saw the strength Maya passed down to her, the resilience I never had. Zoe wasn't just my daughter, she was my guiding light, the reason I kept going when I wanted to stop. Our life changed, but I remained the same. A nurse, a father, a man trying to do right. I still work at St. Mary's, still take Zoe to the park on weekends, still read to her every night. But now, Zoe is the storyteller, and I'm the listener. She talks about dreams bigger than before, about new books, about helping other kids like her, kids treated unfairly by the world. I don't know what the future holds, but I know one thing. Zoe is the miracle Maya spoke of, and no matter how harsh the world is, I'll do everything to protect her, to let her keep shining. In 2024, Zoe's and my life changed completely. Thanks to the success of her autobiography, My Father, we no longer worried about money. I still worked as a nurse at St. Mary's, not because I needed the income, but because it was part of who I am. A way to stay connected to the days with Maya. Zoe, now 11, had become a star, a famous young author appearing on TV shows, speaking at schools, and inspiring millions. But to me, she was still Zoe, the little girl who loved toast with honey, hugged me every night, and teased me for my off-key singing. I thought I had learned to live with the pain of losing Maya, to balance work, raising Zoe, and keeping my heart from breaking. But then, one late autumn day in 2024, a call from my mother turned everything upside down. After nearly a decade of no contact, she called, her voice trembling over the phone. "Adrian, your father and I want to see you and Zoe. This Thanksgiving, come home, okay? We're family no matter what." I stood there, phone in hand, my heart pounding. Part of me wanted to refuse, to yell that they had disowned me, abandoned me when I needed them most. But another part, the part that still remembered my childhood playing basketball with Julian, my mother's cookies, made me hesitate. I looked at Zoe sitting at the kitchen table writing a new story and thought, maybe this is a chance for her to know her grandparents, to heal what was broken. I agreed, though my heart was heavy with unease. That Thanksgiving, Zoe and I drove 2 hours to my parents' house in the Richmond suburbs. The house was the same. Red brick, oak trees, the smell of pumpkin pie wafting from the kitchen. But when I walked in, I felt like a stranger. My parents, now in their 60s with grayer hair, still had the same cold eyes from the day I told them about Maya. Julian and Clara were there too, with their spouses and kids, white blonde children running around the house laughing. Zoe held my hand tighter as we entered. She wore a green dress, her curly hair neatly tied, her smile radiant, but her eyes wary. I knew she was sensitive, that she could feel the tense atmosphere. My mother hugged me, but it was brief and awkward. My father only nodded, saying, "Thanks for coming, Adrian." They looked at Zoe, smiling, but the smile didn't reach their eyes. "You've grown so much, Zoe," my mother said, her voice sweet but insincere. "You look like your mother." The dinner began with a strained atmosphere. The table was laden with food, turkey, mashed potatoes, cornbread, but I didn't feel the warmth of past Thanksgivings. Julian and Clara chatted with each other, asking about their jobs and their kids, but no one asked me or Zoe anything. The grandchildren, Julian's and Clara's kids, were doted on by my parents, given expensive gifts like electronic toys or fancy sweaters. Zoe received a single small gift, an old picture book I'm sure my mother dug up from somewhere in the house. Zoe smiled, thanked them politely, but I saw her eyes dim. The mood worsened as dinner progressed. My mother kept praising the other grandchildren. "Julian's boy is so smart, he'll definitely be a doctor." Or "Clara's girl sings like a star," but said nothing about Zoe, despite the world knowing her as a celebrated author. I tried to stay calm, holding Zoe's hand under the table, hoping she didn't notice the favoritism. After dinner, the kids gathered to play a game. They were split into teams for a scavenger hunt in the yard. Zoe, with her enthusiastic nature, joined in eagerly. She found a toy, a small doll, and held it up excitedly. But one of her cousins, Julian's son, snatched it from her, yelling, "That's mine! You can't take it!" Zoe, surprised but standing her ground, said, "I found it. That's the rule." My mother, her grandmother, standing nearby, overheard. She marched over, her face flushed, and before I could react, she slapped Zoe hard across the cheek. The sound echoed in the yard, silencing everyone. Zoe stood frozen, holding her cheek, her eyes welling with tears. My mother shouted, "You ungrateful black girl! Who do you think you are, trying to compete with your cousin?" Time seemed to stop. My heart shattered, but rage surged like fire. I ran to Zoe, pulled her into my arms, and checked her cheek. A red mark stood out on her brown skin, but what hurt more was the look in her eyes, not pain, but deep hurt. I stood facing my mother, my voice trembling but firm. "Mom, what did you just do? Zoe is your granddaughter, your blood. You don't get to touch her." My mother stepped back, perhaps realizing she'd gone too far, but she doubled down. "I was teaching her manners. She needs to know her place." Those words were the final stab. I looked around, my father silent, Julian and Clara looking down, no one daring to speak. I knew in that moment that this family was no longer mine. I took Zoe's hand and spoke loudly for everyone to hear. "Mom, Dad, listen up. Zoe isn't just your granddaughter. She's an extraordinary girl, a famous author who's overcome more than anyone in this house ever helped with. You don't see that because you only see her skin color. I hoped today would be a chance to heal, but I was wrong. We don't belong here." I turned to Zoe, wiped her tears, and said, "You're my light, Zoe. Let's go home." She nodded, gripping my hand tighter, and we left that house without looking back. On the drive home, Zoe was quiet, staring out the window. I worried, afraid the scar from today would haunt her. But when I asked, "Are you okay?" she smiled, though her eyes were still red. "I'm okay, Daddy. I don't need them. I have you and I have Mom in heaven." I pulled over, hugged her tightly, and cried, not out of sorrow, but because I was so proud of Zoe, stronger than me, stronger than anything Maya ever dreamed. A few days after Thanksgiving, I still couldn't shake the heavy feeling in my chest. The image of Zoe standing frozen, holding her cheek after my mother's slap, replayed every time I closed my eyes. I tried to keep things normal for Zoe, taking her to school, reading to her each night, listening to her talk about ideas for her new book. But deep down, I knew both of us were trying to heal from the wound of that day. Zoe, as always, was stronger than me. She didn't mention the incident at my parents' house, but I noticed small changes. She smiled less, and sometimes I caught her staring into the distance as if questioning something. I wanted to hold her and tell her everything would be okay, but I wasn't sure I believed it myself. How could I promise her a fair world when even her own family treated her that way? Just a few days later, while I was preparing dinner, pasta with tomato sauce, Zoe's favorite, the phone rang. It was Julian. His voice on the line was soft, almost hesitant, unlike his usual confidence. "Adrian, you doing okay? Do you have time to talk?" I gripped the phone tightly, a sense of unease rising. "What's up, Julian?" "Clara and I want to invite you and Zoe to our place this weekend, in Raleigh. Just a small get-together, just family. We want to apologize for what happened at Mom and Dad's. We didn't expect things to go that far." I fell silent. Part of me wanted to believe Julian and Clara were sincere. They hadn't directly hurt Zoe, but they also didn't speak up when Mom slapped her. They stood there, heads down, letting Zoe endure it. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "Julian, thanks for calling. But I think it's too soon. Zoe needs time, and so do I." Julian hesitated, then said, "Adrian, we know Zoe. Zoe's special. We read her books, and my God, she's incredible. We want to make things right, to be part of your lives." His words caught me off guard. They knew about Zoe, her books, her success. I wasn't surprised. Zoe was a phenomenon, appearing in newspapers, on TV, and across social media. But it made me wary. Were they reaching out because they genuinely regretted their actions, or because they'd heard about Zoe's million-dollar royalties? I didn't want to think ill of my brother, but after everything, I couldn't risk Zoe's heart. "Julian, I'm sorry," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. "But Zoe and I are okay. We don't need to force anything. I wish you and Clara the best." I hung up before he could say more. I looked at Zoe sitting at the kitchen table, scribbling in her notebook, and told myself, I did the right thing. I have to protect her. A week after Thanksgiving, on a cold evening, the doorbell rang. Zoe was in the living room, sprawled on the rug, reading a science fiction book. I opened the door and my heart stopped. My parents stood there, Mom in a thick coat, Dad in a wool cap, both looking older than I remembered. Mom smiled, but her eyes were tense. "Adrian, my boy," she said, her voice trembling. "We came to see you and Zoe, is that okay?" I gripped the doorknob, unsure how to respond. I wanted to slam the door, to yell that they had no right to show up after everything. But I saw Zoe stand up, peeking over my shoulder, her big eyes full of curiosity. I didn't want to make a scene in front of her, so I nodded and let them in. Mom stepped forward, hugging Zoe before I could react. "Oh, Zoe, my sweet granddaughter," she said, her voice so saccharine I barely recognized it. "I'm so sorry about the other day. I didn't mean it, you know that. I just lost control. Can you forgive me?" She kissed Zoe's forehead, and I saw Zoe stiffen, not returning the embrace. Dad stood behind, quieter, but he spoke up. "Adrian, we were wrong. We want to start over, to be a family for you and Zoe. You're our blood." He looked at Zoe, attempting a smile. "You're so talented, Zoe. We heard you write books, make a lot of money. We're so proud of you." His words sent a chill through me. They knew about Zoe's money. Of course they did. She was everywhere, from newspapers to TV. I looked at Mom, at the way she stroked Zoe's hair, and I saw the falseness in her actions. They weren't here for Zoe, not for family. They were here for her fame, her money. Anger surged, but I held it back, not wanting Zoe to witness a fight. "Zoe, can you go to your room for a bit?" I said gently. Zoe looked at me, nodded, and grabbed her book, running upstairs. When it was just me and my parents, I stood tall, looking them in the eyes. "Mom, Dad, thanks for coming. But I think we need to stop here. What happened at Thanksgiving wasn't just a loss of control. You hurt Zoe, Mom, and neither of you ever stood up for us, not once. Now when Zoe's successful, you want to be family? I can't trust that." Mom paled, trying to speak. "Adrian, you're misunderstanding. I'm truly sorry. I just want to be close to you and Zoe." But her voice faltered, and I saw the unease in her eyes. Dad cut in. "Adrian, we're getting old. We just want to reconcile, and we're struggling. If you and Zoe could help." That was the final straw. I interrupted. "Enough. Zoe and I don't owe you anything. You disowned me when I married Maya, abandoned me when she died, and now you've hurt Zoe. I won't let you near her again. Please, leave." Mom burst into tears, but I didn't waver. Dad pulled her up, muttering something about me being stubborn. They left, and as the door closed, I leaned against the wall, breathing heavily. I felt both pain and relief. Pain because I had once loved my parents, had hoped they'd change. Relief because I knew I'd done the right thing to protect Zoe. I went to Zoe's room and found her sitting on her bed, clutching her book. "Daddy, are Grandma and Grandpa gone?" she asked softly. I nodded, sat beside her, and pulled her into my arms. "Yeah, they're gone. I'm sorry, Zoe, I didn't want you to go through that again." Zoe looked at me, her eyes shining. "I'm okay, Daddy, I have you, and that's enough." Then she smiled, Maya's smile, and I knew that no matter how harsh the world was, Zoe and I would always be each other's strength. After my parents left, I felt a strange sense of peace. The closing of the door wasn't just an end to the past, it was an affirmation that Zoe and I had chosen our own path. I told myself, I did the right thing. No matter how hard it gets, I'll always protect her. Zoe looked up, smiling at me, and that smile, Maya's smile, was enough to dispel any doubts in my heart. In the weeks that followed, our life settled back into its familiar rhythm. I continued working as a nurse at St. Mary's, staying up late to check on patients, bringing home stories from my shifts to share with Zoe. The job wasn't easy, but it kept me connected to the days with Maya, when we dreamed together of a better world. Zoe kept writing tirelessly. She started a new project, a book about children overcoming prejudice inspired by her own experiences. "Dad, I want kids like me to know they can do anything," Zoe said, her eyes sparkling. I nodded, choking with pride but also worry. The world out there was still harsh, and I didn't want Zoe to face it alone. I'll always be there for her. We're a team, a small but resilient family. Every evening after dinner, Zoe and I sat at the kitchen table. I read medical journals or watched baseball, and she wrote. Sometimes Zoe read aloud parts of her new book, her clear voice brimming with emotion. I listened, not just as a father, but as a fan. Zoe didn't just write, she told healing stories, stories that made others believe they could overcome darkness. Zoe's success grew. My father continued to sell, translated into over 20 languages, and Zoe was invited to literary conferences worldwide. One day, she received a letter from a school in South Africa, where a group of students wrote that her book inspired them to dream big despite growing up in poverty. Zoe read the letter to me, tears glistening, and said, "Dad, I think Mom would be proud of me." I hugged her and said, "Mom's always been proud of you, Zoe. And so am I." But success brought pressure. The media paid more attention not just to Zoe's talent but to our story. A white single father and his talented mixed-race daughter. Some articles hailed Zoe as a symbol of resilience, but there were also vicious online comments, slurs about her skin color, or doubts that an 11-year-old could write such books. I tried to shield Zoe from them, but she was too smart. One day I caught her reading a comment online. "This girl's only famous because of her parents' sad story." Zoe closed the laptop, looked at me and said, "Dad, I don't care what they say. I write because I want to and for Mom." I don't know how an 11-year-old could be so strong, but I knew it was Maya's legacy. Maya gave Zoe not just her smile, but an unbreakable heart, the ability to turn pain into strength. And I, though imperfect, tried to nurture that in her. One evening in early 2025, as snow fell lightly outside, Zoe pulled me into the living room holding a new manuscript. "Dad, I want you to be the first to read this," she said, handing me a thick stack of papers. It was the draft of her new book, Fearless Children. I sat down, reading page after page, and felt my heart open. Zoe wrote about children worldwide, those looked down on for their skin color, circumstances, or dreams. But in her story, they didn't fall. They stood up, held hands, and built a world where no one was left behind. The opening of the story stunned and impressed me. Zoe wrote, I was born being called a person of color, but I don't understand when I'm healthy or sick, my skin is still one color. When I'm happy or sad, my skin is still one color. So why do you call us people of color? When I reached the last page, Zoe sat beside me, watching expectantly. "What do you think, Dad?" she asked. I wiped my tears and pulled her into my arms. "Zoe, you're not just creating miracles, you're helping change the world." That night, lying in bed, I thought about our journey. From the happy days with Maya, to the fateful night she was taken, to the years I struggled as a single father, and now to Zoe's radiant light. I once thought I wasn't strong enough, that I couldn't overcome the pain or protect Zoe from a harsh world. But Zoe taught me that strength isn't about never falling. It's about getting up, no matter how many times you're knocked down. My family, my parents, Julie and Clara, stopped reaching out. Maybe they realized I wouldn't change my mind, or maybe they're quietly plotting some manipulative scheme. I don't care. I only feel regret. Regret that they missed the chance to know Zoe, the incredible girl Maya and I raised. But I don't need them. Zoe and I, we're enough. I still keep our old habit. Every night I read a passage from Maya's diary to Zoe. It's the diary Maya wrote while pregnant with Zoe, filled with dreams and messages for her daughter. One line always moves me. "Zoe, you're my light. No matter how dark the world gets, shine, okay?" Zoe has done that, and I know Maya somewhere is smiling. Our story isn't a fairy tale with a perfect ending. The world still has its dark corners, its prejudices, its injustices. But I've learned that love, my love for Maya, for Zoe, is stronger than all of it. It gives me the strength to get up each day, to protect my daughter, to believe we can make a difference. Zoe is now an inspiration, not just for kids, but for anyone who's ever felt they don't belong. She writes, speaks, and lives with an open heart the way Maya did. And I'm still Adrian Langford, an ordinary nurse, a father trying to do right. But when I look at Zoe, I know I've done the most important thing. Raised a strong, compassionate, fearless girl. Our message is simple, but I hope it echoes far. Family love can overcome any prejudice, any pain. Stand up for those you love and let them shine, even if the world tries to dim their light. Zoe is living proof of that, and I, her father, will forever be proud to be part of her story.